Hello, dear soul travelers and co-creative destiny weavers. Here's Airy Fairy Flowery with another story of the palm tree. I'm actually reading out fairy tales for a few years now on my YouTube channel. So feel free to subscribe to it and to reach more people. I started to also read the stories which I know from the Lucy Körner Verlag. There are wise stories, fairy tales, which have been very popular in the 90s, starting with the 80s and 90s. And one of the stories about this palm tree I know from German, but found a translation in English, which is also included in my book, The Weirding Way, if you're interested. And I think it offers such relevant wisdom for our times, where many of us may experience hardship hardship and fear around uncertainty. So may this story about the palm tree provide you also the wisdom of embracing of it all. Long, long ago, there was a young palm tree who lived in the desert. She loved life and looked forward to experiencing everything that comes her way. She felt joy in each sunrise as the first rays of sunlight touched her branches. She was happy when birds came to rest in her shade. As the day grew hotter, she danced in the desert winds that blew through her leaves, and she listened with a grateful heart to the silence of the night. She thanked God for the gift of being alive. One day a man passed by. He had run away from a nearby town where people had cheated him, and now he bowled with anger as he crossed the pitiless heat of the desert without food or water. In his fury, he resented the youth and happiness of the pine tree and shouted at her, "Hey, you pine tree, why should you be so happy when I am so miserable? If I have to suffer, then you will suffer too." On saying that, he picked up a big, heavy stone and slapped it down on top of the tree's trunk. The palm tree could hardly breathe as she watched the man running away, still grumbling about his life. For a moment, she was completely still, feeling nothing other than numb, confused, and deeply shocked. But then the pain started. It began to fill her heart, spreading from top of her trunk to the smallest twig at the tip of her longest branch. It was an overwhelming pain that left her unable to feel anything else. She felt her heart break, and in her desperation she cried long and loud, but there was nobody to hear her. The desert was silent, and the dark night was the only witness to her suffering. For a long time she did nothing, hoping every minute, every hour, every day that the pain would finally stop. She was both sad and angry. Her life had been so beautiful, so full of promise, and it had been twisted into this painful and unjust existence. She did not want to suffer anymore, and after some time she decided to try and do something to end the agony. If she could only move the stone. She took a long, deep breath and tried to push it away, but it wouldn't move. She tried again, gathering all her strength, but she could not move the stone a hair's breadth. It remained in place. its weight still crushing down upon her. She kept trying over and over again, her strength ebbing away as she grew more and more tired, until she finally realized that she was incapable of pushing the stone away, and she gave up. That sense of hopelessness grew within her, and for a long time she couldn't see any way of fighting the pain. She wanted to live, yes, but if life promised nothing other than this pain, why bother to endure it? Why should she wake up in the morning if nothing but desperation waited for her? She no longer felt pleasure in the sunlight, the bird song, the evening breeze. She began to hate life and wanted to die. If life is only pain, she cried to the desert silence, then I don't want to live anymore. Overwhelmed by these feelings of helplessness, she drifted off into sleep. But when she woke up the next morning, she knew that something had changed. At first, she didn't know what it was, but then she realized she could feel cold, nourishing water coming up through her roots into her trunk, soothing her and easing the pain. She tried to understand what was happening, and then she realized the weight of the stone, as it had been crushing her, had also pushed her deeper into the earth, until finally she had reached an underground stream. Its restoring powers gave her a moment of renewed hope, and she felt strength coming back into her branches. Although she could still feel the stone as heavy as before, she was once again able to feel the power to grow pulsing inside her. After a time of a grief that had seemed endless, this was the first moment of joy she had known, and it filled her heart until it felt as if it would burst. The water continued to nourish the palm tree and enabled her to grow until she became one of the biggest trees in the desert. All the while she carried the stone, its weight always there, sometimes hurting more and sometimes less, until she learned to accept it as a part of herself and embrace the stone with her leaves as if she were protecting her most vulnerable, most painful part. Despite the stone, she learned to feel joy again and to feel happiness when birds came to rest in her lush, inviting branches, and people sheltered beneath her from the sandstorms that ravaged the desert. Once again, she felt deeply grateful for the gift of her life. May the blessing of acceptance and embracing of all our parts also lovingly touch you and weave through you. Many blessings. Blagadoru.